Shalom, and welcome to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. You're listening to a sermon delivered by Rabbi Adam Kligfeld on the second day of Sukkot.
I had a terrible ufruf 26 plus years ago. And I'll get back to that in a second. But it ended up being a very, very hard day of my life, which I was not expecting. I want you to think of the following phrases, and pretty soon, hopefully, what they have in common will become obvious. An open secret, desperate hope, seriously funny, original copy, bittersweet, a phrase that Rabbi Shapiro coined, at least in our senior staff, a blurse, which is a blessing curse, fighting for peace, controlled chaos, and jumbo shrimp. 2 or 3 word phrases that are oxymoronic, where the second word somehow undermines or negates or pushes against the first word. It's actually a very common thing in language. And it's the kind of thing that when you hear it, if you listen to it, it makes you think about what are the possible contours of how that language is being used. The Kutzker Rebbe made famous a slightly longer version of an oxymoronic phrase, which was turned into a song by Naomi Shemer, Ein davar shalem yoter milev shavur. There's nothing more whole than a broken heart. There are other linguistic things like that where the words can mean 2 different things sometimes at the same time. We talked about this at several different times in our community, how it's very hard to make this campus a sanctuary and a sanctuary at the same time. It's hard to make it a sanctuary which is safe, protected, secure, guarded, and also have it be a sanctuary where anyone can find home and a sense of belonging here. Very hard to do. I want to add to those oxymoronic phrases a term that we say all the time, particularly for regular daveners, and should be on our minds this week, and that is Sukkat Shalom. A Sukkah of peace. Why is the thing that we're asking for God in the Hashkivenu prayer, why is the image of the type of shalom that should be bestowed upon us a sukkah? Why are we asking for a peace which is so flimsy, which is so temporary? You could make the argument that the concept of Sukkat Shalom is earlier than the concept of sukkah, which means a flimsy booth, because the word sukkah comes from the Hebrew root samach kaf kaf, or samach kafeh, which just means to cover. Right? In Parshat Shumah, when we meet the kruvim, the cherubs, they are sochachim b'kanfehem. They're covering the ark with their wings. That doesn't seem so flimsy. And even in this haftarah that Rick just read, we have a reference to those very kruvim. And the verse he read, Vayasoku hakruvim al ha'aron. The cherubs covered the Aron with their presence. So maybe Sukkat Shalom just has to do with covering. But it's impossible to live and dwell in the world of Jewish words and Jewish images and hear Sukkat Shalom and not think of the flimsy, temporary, unsteady, unsturdy, unguaranteed building out there to which we're supposed to be going, leaving the sturdiness of our homes. Why are we asking for such a small thing? For such a thing that could be knocked over so quickly? Why are we asking for an armon shalom, a palace of peace, a temple of shalom? Why is Sukkat Shalom? I'm going to give you the answer by the Sfat Emet, Rabbi Yehuda Alter Leib of Ger, one of the rabbis of the Ger Hasidic dynasties. In a beautifully spiritual teaching that I want to be very clear, I'm intentionally not addressing his teaching to modern geopolitics and warfare, although they are dancing with one another. He says there are two aspects of shalom, of peace, that we struggle to confront. We even struggle to accept. It doesn't mean they're not true. There are plenty of things that we struggle to accept that are true. One thing about peace and the notion of why it's a Sukkat Shalom is because the Sukkah is called Dirat Arai, as opposed to Dirat Keva, a dwelling that is temporary, that is almost accidental, as opposed to a dwelling that is going to last forever. He says that peace is always fragile. It is never guaranteed. The fact that you have it today does not mean you will have it tomorrow, in any realm in which the word peace might be used. Peace always needs shoring up. There's no fortress of peace, he says. There's no palace that can last without the ongoing input to make sure it's going to be steady. And the second thing he says about why it's a Sukkat Shalom, why it's the most appropriate of images, is that the truest peace never comes from human might. That is not to say that war and might is never righteous. The border of a country may become secure through might, that's true. But the peace within the heart comes from God's presence resting upon us, which is delicate. Sometimes it's imperceptible. It can be shaken easily. And like a sukkah, it is exposed. In our relationship with others and with God, it's when we become vulnerable, like a sukkah, that peace may enter. The morning of my ufruf in Connecticut, the day that I was going to fly to Los Angeles to get married, I had a very, very bad fight with my mother. And we are a mother-daughter, mother-son relationship that for the most part has been intact and strong forever. Perfect? No such thing. But I was not anticipating a terrible quarrel with my mother leading up to my wedding, my ufruf. The details are not significant, but there was a pallor and a tension that hung over the house, and the ufruf, which was at my home shul in Orange, Connecticut, I said the words, and I'm sure they sang Mazel Tov and Odi Shema, and I'm sure I had a bagel, but there was a terrible, palpable heaviness between us. What happened next is that after the ufruf, I assume I went home to my house, and my mother, just my mother for some reason, was going to be driving me to Bradley Airport in Hartford to fly to Los Angeles, where I was going to spend a couple of days with friends before the wedding. It's about an hour and 5-minute drive from my home to the airport. And for the first half an hour of it, there was dead silence. And I had a terrible feeling that I was about to say goodbye to my mother in the midst of a terrible spat. And the next time I was going to see her, I was essentially walking down the aisle, thinking, is this me? Is this my relationship? Is this reality? Could it be that this is the way I'm going to experience the days and hours leading up to my wedding? And I was furious at her for something, which I still think I was right about 26 years later. Meaning I thought that my rage was warranted, given certain things that had taken place. But something told me that she was equally convinced that her anger at me was warranted, and that unless one of us took a step first, this was going to be our departure, and it was going to hang over us until the wedding. About 20 minutes from the airport, I turned to my mother who was driving, and I said to her verbatim, Ima, I'm scared. I'm scared to get married. And I was. I think it's a natural thing to be afraid of a forever commitment, that leap of faith. I don't remember the exact language that came next, but what I know is that an angry mother turned into a compassionate mother, and a furious son turned into a son who needed his mother's love. And for 20 minutes, we found a way to make peace without even ever having gone to the thing that had caused so much consternation that morning. And when we got to the airport and she dropped me off and we hugged and we kissed, it was real, it was warm, and we had a marvelous time as a mother and as a son at the wedding a few days later. And because of that, our chuppah was a Sukkat Shalom, when it was very easily turning into something very different. Peace, like love, needs to be fed. It needs to be sustained. As the couples therapist John Gottman, who is based in Seattle, happens to be an Orthodox Jew, I think that's mostly irrelevant to his methodology, but it's an interesting fact. He says that in order for love of all types, and then many different types of love and many different ways of expressing it, there has to be about 5 positive, nourishing, shoring, investing encounters and moments for every 1 negative. There are negative encounters in all relationships. If the ratio is about 5-1, that's a sukkah that has a chance of withstanding a strong wind. If that does not happen, the love will fall, the sukkah will fail. And to assume that it will be solid and always sunny and reliably there will only assure that it will dissipate. The Sfat Emet had a nickname for the Sukkah. It was called the Tzila de Mehemnuta, which is Aramaic for the shadow of faith. He likened the Sukkah to the part of faith which sometimes appears in a shadow. It's based on the Zohar, suggesting that it can be dark in there at times in a relationship of faith. But that exposure to the elements and that fear is seen as the very condition of divine protection. The willingness to open oneself up to God's love or another's love is the surest way to open the portal for that love to flow. And in the other direction, assuming that you are fully built with reinforced windows and a roof that can withstand any storm will almost surely beckon the type of wind that will show you just how vulnerable your love, your peace, and your faith is. The truest peace does not emerge from walls of stone, but from trust in and openness to God and to one another. Someone has to melt first in a relationship. Someone has to expose their flank. Someone has to be first to apologize. This year, in all of your relationships with God, with spouse, with friend, with a child, don't just dwell in a sukkah. Don't just ask God to bestow a sukkah of peace. Become one.
You've been listening to another in our series of podcasts from Temple Beth Am, a dynamic center for conservative Judaism in Los Angeles. If you enjoy these podcasts, we invite you to write a review on the Apple Podcast website or wherever you get your podcasts. For more information on Temple Beth Am, Los Angeles, please visit www.tbala.org.